Everyone, welcome to LH Podcast. Today we have James Levy from St Ives Railway office, one of the leading sales agents in the area. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Welcome.
First, can you start by talking about yourself? You know, what's your past experience in your career in the industry?
So I've been in real estate now for 24 years, so it's gone very quickly. I started in January 2001, and prior to that, I actually was an accountant. So a very big difference, but real estate is something that I'd always followed. I'd actually got into architecture after school, but changed and did accounting. So I then moved from there and moved into real estate and haven't looked back. I thought I'd give it a go, but then I worked out you can't just give it a go. You've got to be focused. And here we are 24 years later. My interest in real estate's actually been long lasting. I actually found our family home when I was 14 in the days where you'd plough through the Sydney Morning Herald, and that was the only form of locating a property. I found it back then, and I always have had an interest. I'd go around to open homes with my mum. We'd take the floor plan home. We'd analyse what we do. From there, I did go to uni and obviously did the accounting degree, but I always had the interest in property, and I couldn't get away from that. My final years of being an accountant, the last quarter of that year, I actually did real estate on Saturdays, helped an agent in the area to give it a go. And then I thought, no, I need to do this, and I did it. And there's a great saying that if you love what you do, it's not work. And yes, there are ups and downs with whatever you do, but by and large, I love what I do, and it's been a very fast 24-year ride.
Hey, James, you were born and bred in St Ives. Can you tell us more about what was St Ives like when you were a kid?
So many years ago, as my nieces say, what happened in the olden days was very community-based. You'd see people in the shopping centre that wasn't as large as what it was.
Still the same shopping centre?
So yes, it's not it's larger now than what it was. There was only one level at one stage before they'd called what they then called the new centre. From memory, that was probably in the early 80s that was added on. But there were 5 primary schools, 5 public primary schools, of which there are only 3 now. So the whole area, I guess every area goes through a change. But in those days, yes, we'd ride bikes, we'd billy cart. I'd try and ride a skateboard, but couldn't. So we had a lot of fun in the streets. But I guess like times have changed today, kids spend a lot more time on devices as well.
There is a skateboarding park now.
There is. It's a very big draw card, and of course McDonald's is there, and
KFC.
And KFC.
Oh yes, KFC. McDonald's wasn't there when I was growing up. We had to go to Waitara to have our parties. So when McDonald's came, it was like it's a big thing.
Not Gordon.
And Gordon, but Gordon's a little bit different.
Oh, okay. Okay. What was the demographic like back then?
So it was very in the 70s and maybe early 80s. The demographic, yes, was Caucasian. A lot of people had grown up in the area and were rearing their families. I remember in the early 80s where the first wave of South Africans started to move into the suburb, because for them it was very similar to what Johannesburg was, and at the time, when they moved across, there were restrictions on how much money they could bring, but they brought a lot in cars. So I love cars, and I always remember as a child admiring the cars they'd bring across, and then they'd sell them. So that was probably about 81 to 83. The first wave of South Africans started to move in, and that was a great hive of culture activity, and added a really lovely dynamic to the area. And from there it just continued exponentially in terms of the number moving in.
Wow. Like as you started like 20 years ago in the St Ives, and what's the median price like back then?
So in 2001, I always got excited if I was able to sell a home that was over $600,000.
Wow.
Okay. Wow. Okay. What's the current St Ives medium?
I guess price? Now it's probably about 2.8, maybe over 3. And I also remember actually not too long ago, or I guess it's all put into perspective, if you said that a property was $2 million or more in St Ives, people would not scoff at you, but they'd think, were there gold-plated toilet seats or something to warrant that price? And now you look at the number or the volume of sales are in excess of $6 million. But of course, that's relative with all the prices going up everywhere as well.
Was there back then a very active market as well?
It was an active market, but the whole dynamic of the market has changed now. Probably within the last 8 years, St Ives has become much more a primary choice where people want to be. Often we'd be told that it wasn't on the railway line. Well, yes, it never has been. But for many people, they don't realise even if they're living or buying in a suburb that has a railway line, they're still commuting back and forth to the railway line on a bus or in a car. So St Ives really has been discovered now in a way that it's become a central hub. So you can easily go to Hornsby, Macquarie, Chatswood, the city, the beaches. It's far more of an area in which people can go in any direction they want to be. So it is a primary choice, and it's developed in a way that it has its own entity, and it's a bit like a country town. There are defined boundaries, whereas the boundary between Pymble and Turramurra may merge, whereas St Ives is a very defined boundary and holds up in terms of it being its own suburb.
Yeah. You know, when Lee and I did a bit of research, and when we do our market analysis, we have to separate St Ives because we found the volume and it's so big that we can't include it in other Coringa areas. We have to separate, and the increment is so much different to compare with other
the growth, and I think again the dynamics of the market changing has contributed to that. The other aspect that's been quite different is that St Ives typically, we look at the history 12 years before 12 years ago, was that we didn't have a lot of apartments. And of course, that's very much changed with all the rezoning that's happened in the last 12 years. So the demographical change again has played a big part in the in the changes in the area.
Yeah, because obviously we deal with a lot of Chinese buyers, and most of the Chinese buyers who eventually chose to buy in St Ives is because they couldn't find houses along the train line with the similar conditions, maybe not as new as the houses in St Ives.
Yes,
and that becomes more.
It's more attractive because we don't have the conservation areas.
Exactly.
Although truth be told, that we have a few homes that actually have heritage listings,
a couple of streets,
couple of streets and homes. So that in itself, people find quite interesting. But certainly along the railway line, you will have conservation areas, you will have heritage listings. So the buyers are loving St Ives because it is a newer suburb, but it allows for easier development. So you will get new homes, and it's
less trees,
and probably more level in many aspects as well.
Yeah. It's a high point of the
lovely Ridgeway,
Ku-ring-gai area.
Yeah,
so,
and also you look at the schooling that's nearby. It offers a great cross section of schooling, and of course there's the shopping centre as well. The City Express bus service has been a very great asset to St Ives in terms of picking up and going directly to Wynyard and Town Hall. So people have really enjoyed that bonus to the suburb.
You mentioned in the demographic change. So I believe there are a lot of houses on different streets that have changed their outlook. So back then and now, in your mind.
That's a very interesting point, because if we look at 40, 50 years ago, what the prime areas in St Ives were or streets, they still are, but there are, because of the prolific level of development and capital improvement in homes, it's actually not as isolated from that street to that street now. You can just look at each street, and if somebody has invested in one home, then others are investing around it. And what perhaps was before a great street still is, but there are others that are on par purely because of the level of investment within that street. So people are looking at the newer homes within a particular street and reclassifying to say that, it is a great location just by the nature of the level of investment in that street. So you've still got your traditional streets, but there are far more on par because of the level of development people have done.
Yeah.
It's interesting because some buyers don't specifically start out thinking that they want to buy in the St Ives area, as you may find, but they all of a sudden locate a home that ticks all their boxes, and they've discovered St Ives in a way that, really, wow, it is a great area and it's one that we can be in.
Yeah, and to be honest, in this market, buyers with 3 to 5 mil range, budget range, they have to look into St Ives because, most of the houses in St Ives do, as you said, tick all the boxes for them.
It does offer good value for money, as it always has. But if we've got different tiers, so people can still buy in the suburb under $3 million for a home, and they'll get a nice home. And then you've got the tier that's probably up to the early threes, and then you look 3.5 to 5 is a different band as well, and then from there you've got the 5+, which also incorporates the 6s.
Yeah. Speaking of the buyers on the market now, from what we saw, 3 mil to 4 mil in that range are more active and obviously more competitive than other ranges. Is that what you're seeing tonight?
Yes, under 3 is very competitive as well. But with the price ranges, it's a bit like a pyramid because the higher the level in the pyramid correlates to the number of buyers in relation to the price point. So, yes, the pinnacle is the highest price point where you've got less buyers. But for the general demographic that are moving into the area, they're upsizing. So whether it be that they're upsizing from an apartment or a townhouse, or perhaps even a semi somewhere, moving up for schooling, larger backyard, a pool. That's the general demographic of the buyers that are moving into the area.
Obviously, there's been a massive talk or discussion about the rezone. What do you think that'll affect St Ives?
In terms of where we are currently with the potential rezoning, I think the way that it's affected St Ives more is that perhaps people are moving to St Ives as an option to look at to buy. One, because there's less choice along the railway line, and secondly, probably more the unknown about what's happening along the railway line forces them to look at St Ives. I think if we look at the potential for dual occupancies, that's probably going to greater benefit somebody's personal situation, whereby they may have a home and they want to build another one behind for family, or they want to build a new one behind for them and they'll sell the front one. Not so much for developers as much, because it will, when they actually define the size of the dual occupancies that can be built, that will depend, that will dictate the commercial reality of whether or not it's viable for a developer to do. And it may well be that they're still better off building one new dwelling rather than 2. So there's a lot of ambiguity at the moment about the rezoning and how it affects St Ives, and I think until everything's laid down, we're really not going to know. But that's sort of my thought at the moment.
I think the new buildings in Ives has brought a bit of boom in the market. So James, you personally have 3 record sales in the area. So do you have some opinion on or some different views on the market of the new build in St Ives?
So in terms of those records that I have broken over my years, one was a 2-year-old home, and it was built at the time where there were probably less new builds than what there has been in recent 12 months. The other 2 really come back to special, unique properties on land, because ultimately, as we all know, it's the land that's the underlying value of any property, and that's the asset that people are buying. But again, it comes back to location. And as much as I said earlier that some streets have really raised the bar when they perhaps weren't as attractive before, it's basing the assessment on the property surrounding it that's very important. And there might be one new build that's being built in a home, and then all of a sudden you've got people that are building next door or across the road. But for a lot of people, there are new properties being built actually for people to live in, and they may have lived in their home for 10 years. They've gone right round in circles about whether they add on, whether they renovate, or whether they move. And for many, they love the location, so they just think it's easier to knock down the house and rebuild and live in it. So not all the new builds have been built to sell. They are being built to live in and enjoy as well.
When we meet all the buyers, they came to St. Ives, buy some new builds. What they're looking for, like primarily more leaning towards location or home style or the build itself. So what they're
I think sometimes it might be one access to one particular school over another, but it's not always, and that's probably only about 20% of buyers. The key thing that people are probably looking for is the size of the house, as well as the land, because again, the land is the very big thing that they're looking for. A lot less buyers are happy to renovate. They'd much rather just move in and start living, because they're time poor, and a lot of people don't have that vision to see that you can change the red wall and make it white. They're only seeing it for what it is now. So being able to see exactly what they want and move seamlessly into another one is key. But in terms of what drives them, it's probably backyard accommodation in terms of that family environment that they're looking for.
Where are majority of the buyers come from?
So I think there's a misconception out there, particularly with the demographical changes in St. Ives with the increase in Chinese buyers. A lot of people think that they're just coming in from the airport with luggage full of cash. It's not so much. The buyers, they may be upsizing from St. Ives, but there's a very big pool from Chatswood, Burwood, Rhodes, Wentworth Point, even Hurstville, for the schoolings and for the backyard. But the buyers are generally not necessarily buying their first property, but it's their upsizing property, as they might come in with one toddler and another one on the way, and they can even be looking for a particular school when they actually haven't had a baby yet at all. It's a very interesting cycle, but it's normally their first house and an upsizing motivation.
First house, but second home, maybe.
That's right, yes. Second purchase or something.
Yeah.
We do find a lot of buyers there from Upper North Shore as well, from even a Lingfield or from
local
Turramurra
buyers.
or Gordon. They moving to St. Ives because of the lifestyle and then the quality of the home.
Absolutely,
And
from
they
what
don't
they've been
to-
looking.
Yeah, they don't want to renovate their own home and just buy a new one and move in.
Well, actually, you and I had
Yes.
that dynamic happening on a purchase recently. So I think particularly with the amount of restraints that people can have renovating or building along the railway line, provides St. Ives provides them with a solution for a newer home or a new home that they otherwise wouldn't be able to find.
Yeah, exactly. When we look for the properties in St. Ives, we found quite a few homes that were built about 15 to 20 years ago. So back then, like a lot of Meadowbank home was there as well. So was there another new build boom back then, like 15 years ago? Or?
The new build boom that we've seen probably in the last 3 years is a boom that we've not seen before. You may look at a few homes built, as you say, by Meadowbank in the 90s. You can back before that, but those homes were actually typically built for people to live in, unless it was a larger block that was being subdivided. And what you'll find then is that somebody bought that block and built a home for them, and then they'd build another home to sell. But in terms of the proliferation of specific developers building new builds and selling them, that's something new for St. Ives. Yes, you may have had the odd one, but certainly not the volume that we've had now.
And James, what are your favourite streets in St. Ives? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
I think they're all wonderful.
yeah, that's not the answer I'm looking for. just name a few.
So in terms of favourite, you could look at favourites from all different perspectives, whether it be the architecture, whether it be the feel, whether it be the location.
Yeah.
I love architecture, so if you look
Torquay.
Well, if you look at, yes, Torquay identifies the architecture in the late 60s, early 70s, and the whole nature of that subdivision at the time was an American Georgian colonial feel, which has to be retained. So that didn't, and I remember riding my bike around Torquay Avenue as a 10-year-old looking at the homes back then.
I want to live here 20 years after.
And then you can look at Richmond Avenue, a street whereby they're Ped and Sevitt homes that have heritage listings, because that was a show home area of the new Pettit and Sevitt homes at the time. You can look at Benaroon Avenue, which has a lovely vista driving through it. You can then look at Camborne Avenue, which has wonderful views over the bush, northeasterly views. So if you put each street in context as to why you may like it or what the appeal has, and I think St Ives is great because it does offer a whole diversity of property. It's not just a Californian bungalow everywhere. You've got many different types of homes and settings that pulls it all together to provide a lot for what people are looking for.
Okay, that's all we have for today, James. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Nice to chat as always, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Or see you on maybe Saturday at any inspections or auctions.